Can you combine different spiritual practices to create your own combined pathway? Maybe something like a mixed spiritual arts? Or maybe there are dangers lurking in that kind of combination and you need to be careful. Watch this video to find out the one thing that you need to keep in mind when creating your own mixed spiritual arts. Okay, we live in an age of interconnection and integration. The world's knowledge is at your fingertips, right? So you take your phone and you literally have the whole history of knowledge of humanity available to you, including all the different traditions, all the different spiritual traditions. In the past, people didn't have access to this. They only had access to whatever their own immediate ancestors, their own immediate environment knew of, right? That's it. It's very different today. Now, for spiritual seekers, that's a blessing or can also be a hindrance, an obstacle, because what are you going to choose? Which path are you going to choose? Like someone who is spiritually awakening, who is experiencing their first type of spiritual awakening, who's searching, who's going on a journey, goes on a path. What method are they going to choose? Which path are they going to choose? This is going to be a question for people, right? And do they have to choose one? Do you have to choose one? Or can you just mix and match? Can you take practices, a little bit of meditation from Buddhism and a little bit of prayer from Christianity and a little bit of, right, different practices from New Age beliefs, right? Maybe a little bit of witchcraft and a little bit of this, a little bit of that, put things together and then have your own kind of mixed spiritual practice. In reality, that's what a lot of people do these days. A lot of people do that these days, right? Majority of people, maybe most of those people who say they're spiritual but not religious, right? And actually a lot of people who are religious too. But can you do this? Can you do this, right? Or are there dangers lurking? So watch this video till the end because I'm going to tell you exactly the thing that you need to pay attention to that allows you to do this in a way that makes sense, right? That doesn't actually throw you back, that doesn't actually hold you back and keep you back, right? And it's not so easy as just mixing and matching everything, right? Obviously, the comparison makes a lot of sense, and the era that we live in has shown us that it works to combine and to synthesize. Just look at mixed martial arts. Mixed martial arts, right? Look at mixed martial arts. So mixed martial arts, the history of mixed martial arts is super interesting because it has this, it shows you basically, right, that traditions in today's world, how they gonna converge, right? It starts with, if you look into the history with the valetudo and the, pride fighting and so on, when it started initially, it was basically people with different traditions coming fighting against each other, right? A wrestler and a sumo guy, right? And a karate guy, right? And, kung fu guy. And they would all just do their style, right? They would do their style and they would come and fight against each other, right? And what happened is that, well, first of all, Gracie family happened, like Royce Gracie and, the Brazilian thing happened, right? The Gracie family came and they just kind of wiped the floor with everybody that just was in their way, right? By using Brazilian jiu-jitsu, showing everybody that if you're not gonna fight on the ground, you can stand no chance, right? There's nothing you can do. We're gonna take you down and it's over, right? But then shortly after, and when that happened, shortly after, what people started to realize is that, wait a minute, we need to combine traditions. We can't just keep one tradition, right? This is really interesting when you watch the early MMA, right? Until then, people like Ken Shamrock turn up and they start to create synthesis. Those were people who would actually go and train different traditions, right? It was the first time that people would start to systematically train different traditions and try to bring them together. Some boxing and some ground fighting and some, right? Some judo and some boxing, for instance, right? And would start to synthesize those, right? Although I gotta say, Bruce Lee was the pioneer. Bruce Lee was perhaps the first person decades before who was already doing this, right? And going far beyond his time. But what am I talking about this? Why am I talking about this? Let's bring this back to the spiritual practices. Though before that, make sure subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss anything that comes up here. And go on ultrasapien.xyz, where you can put your name down for the avalanche, right, of content and opportunities that we're creating at the Ultrasapien Institute for everybody, right? So let's get back to mixed spiritual arts. We saw that in mixed martial arts, it works. That was the practice. That was the history, right? But is it work with spiritual traditions? Does it work with spiritual traditions? Is it the same thing? Can you just pick, a bit of this, a bit of that, and put them together? So what do the actual spiritual traditions say about this? The wisdom traditions. Let's talk about that. What do the wisdom traditions say about this? When you look at what the wisdom traditions say about mixing, right, about kind of cross-tradition integration, you need to distinguish between the exoteric and the esoteric side, right? Exoteric and the esoteric side, okay? So exoteric religion is the outward presentation, is what you have to do outwardly, is the teachings that are about, pray this many times a day, say these prayers, eat at this time, fast at this time, have this type of behavior towards other people, marry in this way, and so on, right? All of the outward behaviors and inhibitions and also prohibitions as well, right? And then you have the esoteric side of things, the esoteric side. So esoteric is the internal perspective, right? The inner, the secret tradition. And every global tradition has actually an inner tradition as well, right? So in Christianity, you have esoteric Christianity, hesychasm in Orthodoxy, and Western esoteric orders, various orders, Martinism, and other types of Gnostic, Hermetic Christianity, and those traditions. In the Islamic tradition, you have Sufism, right? Sufism is the sort of the inner tradition, the esoteric tradition. And in Hinduism, you have Kashmir Shaivism, you have Tantra, Kaula, you have lots of different kind of competing, Vedanta as well, obviously, competing, but also somehow integrated and similar esoteric traditions, right? And in Buddhism, you have Vajrayana. All of these esoteric schools, what they have in common is they say that, yes, actually, all the religions are doing the same thing, they're just doing it differently, right? They don't say that, there's just the esoteric traditions, if you listen to them themselves, they're more about, they're more about states and levels of consciousness and internal development as opposed to what you do. So that's compatible. Well, when you look at the exoteric front on the rules, and the how to pray and how not to pray, what to eat, what not to eat, that's not compatible, right? Exoterically, none of the religions is compatible. And any exoteric priest or religious scholar will tell you, no, it's not compatible. This religion the other religions are wrong. This is true, the other ones are wrong. If you are mixing, then you are a infidel, right? Or whatever, right? You're falling off from the true path, right? That's what they're going to say. They will not allow mixing exoterically, right? Esoterically, it's different. Always been sort of understood that there is a commonality across all the traditions by the esoteric practitioners, even sometimes very explicitly. Amongst the Sufis, Ibn Arabi, he speaks of Wahdat al-Wujud. And he says that in the Wahdat al-Wujud, the unity of all existence, there is unity of all practices and unities of all ways. They all reach to the same. Rumi says the same thing. The Sufis were actually very advanced on this path. They made it quite explicit. They said that often, that all the religions are internally true and related to each other. But now, fast forward to the 20th century. In the 20th century, because this gets to where it becomes interesting for you, right? In the 20th century, not that we're in the 20th century, but we're still dealing with the concepts that were developed in the 20th century. In the 21st century, our framework is still the same, right? It's still like, that's our basis, our foundation. In the 20th century, you had two responses, two different ways to deal with this problem, right? Is it allowed to mix different religions? Is it allowed to mix different spiritual practices, right? They are called, the one is called Theosophy, and the other one is called Traditionalism, okay? Theosophy, it's a approach, it's a school, it's a philosophy that was developed by Helena Blavatsky, Madame Blavatsky, right? Who was a seer, a mystic, a traveler, clairvoyant, right? She went to everywhere globally, and she eventually got to the US. She partnered up with some people there, and then they founded the Theosophical Society. She wrote this huge book, Isis Unveiled, and then The Secret Doctrine. And in her books, she basically presents all religious teachings of the world as informed by this one secret doctrine, right? The one secret doctrine. And she says that basically all the religions of the world doing the same thing somehow. And she plays with this thing that I mentioned about the esoteric traditions, right? The esoteric traditions always kind of said this already implicitly. She makes it explicit. She's the first to make it explicit. She writes a whole book about it, right? And she says that, yeah, you can mix and match everything, and because actually they're all part of this secret doctrine that was forgotten. You know, the ancients had it, Atlantis, and, you know, the Lemurians and the ancient people, the people that are before the flood, the antediluvian people, before the flood, before Noah's flood, right? The lost civilizations, the sunk civilizations, they had this one religion, they passed it on, and then it kind of got lost in translation. And now this secret doctrine, a modern seeker can just kind of get this out again, and you can practice from whatever you find, what works for you in the different traditions, because it's all part of this one secret theosophy, right? Obviously, if this sounds familiar, this is the foundation of New Ageism. Today, the New Age is basically a direct development out of theosophy, right? It's a direct kind of continuation of theosophy. So that's the one strand, right? The one strand. The other strand, important one in the 20th century, is called traditionalism. Traditionalism, right? So traditionalism, it was founded by some very, very serious people, right? Some really serious people. René Guénon and Fridtjof Schuon, right? Fridtjof Schuon, René Guénon, maybe Julius Evola, you can count to that too. You know, that kind of group of early founders, mostly René Guénon and Fridtjof Schuon. And these guys, they basically say that all the religious traditions, they're part of the perennial tradition, the Sophia Perennis. Perennialism, it's also called, the Sophia Perennis. It means the eternal knowledge, right? And this actually has a term in every other tradition. There is a term for this, Hikmat al-Abadi, right? Or it's called Sanatan Dharma in the Indian tradition, right? Sophia Perennis in the Western naming, right? And this Sophia Perennis, this eternal knowledge, is the common gift of God to humanity, in the form of many different revelations. So each of those revelations has a part of the puzzle, right, of truth. However, the traditionalists are very different to the theosophists, because the traditionalists say that these traditions are only transcendently unified. There's a transcendent unity of the religions, which means that they are unified on like a tree. It's like a tree with a trunk, and you can see now all of these different branches, and this branch is Islam, and this branch is Christianity, and this branch is Buddhism, and this branch is, you know, Hinduism, and so on and so forth, right? And this branch is Native American, shamanism, right? All of them are different branches. But the trunk where they are united, the trunk, you cannot see it. It's in the transcendent realm. It's only God knows it, the trunk, right? Humans, we cannot see. We can only see the branches. Right? They're all united, but not for us, basically, is what they're saying. You can know it, you know, intuitively, but you cannot know it in practice, is what they're saying. So therefore, their conclusion is, that these guys, the traditionalists, their conclusion is, even though all the traditions, all the religious traditions are true, you can only follow one. You need to choose one. You need to choose one, and you can only follow that one. You cannot mix and match. You cannot, they hate the theosophists and the traditionalists, they hate each other. The traditionalists hate the theosophists, right? They say like, these guys are, you know, they hate any new agey mixing kind of stuff, right? They say like, you need to choose one tradition and stick with that. Then you can have the greatest respect for all the others, but you can't actually, and they use the example, one of these traditionalists, famous traditionalists, use the example of, you have your wife, right? And you can respect that others have wives, but you are with your wife, right? Basically, something like that. That image they use. And, well, you know, there's a point to that, but that's not really the main takeaway for us. The main takeaway for us, we're going to ask ourselves, what do we do today, right? Are we going to follow the Theosophists, the New Age idea? You can mix and match from every tradition, everything you want. Or do we have to follow the Traditionalists? No, you need to choose one tradition and you need to stick with that, right? In order to understand why, in order to understand the answer, we need to understand why they said it first. Why did they say this? Then we understand the answer, right? If we know why they said it. So each one of them, actually this is a dichotomy, this is an antinomy. There is an antinomy right here between these two different proposals. And each one of them has some truth to it, right? But each one of them is also limited. We need to get to the higher truth. So here's the thing. Here's how they're limited and here's where they're true. The Theosophists, they have a point when they say that in our age, we have access to all the traditions and people gonna mix. People gonna do people stuff, right? People gonna be exposed to all the different traditions and more, they're gonna learn and be inspired and they're gonna see and they're gonna get the downloads here and they're gonna mix and you can't prohibit and prevent it. They're always gonna do that. It's better to just give them the doctrine and to teach, how you can integrate this stuff and make it make sense together, right? And well, that's true. We are in an age where we have access to all of that stuff, right? But the traditionalists, they have a point too. Because the traditionalists, they say, if you start to mix and match, you lose the system, you lose the structure, which is in the tradition. Every revealed tradition has a system and a structure. It's been passed on over generations and generations. And without that system, without that structure, you're going to fall off into dangerous territory because every system, every structure has safeguards in it. There are certain safeguards. On every level, there's a safeguard. It says, if you have this experience, be careful. If you have this experience, don't do this. Don't do this first. Do that first, right? There's safeguards in the system. And if you're just starting to mix and match, you're giving up the safeguards. And you're like somebody who's trying to fly without having learned before, right? Without having... I don't know if that metaphor works for you, but you're trying to, or let's say you're trying to swim, without having learned before, right? You don't have the safeguards anymore, right? And it's dangerous. You're gonna sink. You're gonna die, right? And sinking and dying in spiritual field, it means you're gonna encounter demons. You're gonna fall into dark spiritual holes, right? You think you're doing something spiritual, but in reality, you're evoking demons. That's what the traditionalists say, right? If you start mix and match, if you lose the safeguards, right? And you're going to end in psychosis and all kinds of things that come from spiritual calamities, let's say, right? And I'm sure people in the New Age sphere, everybody who is in New Age world, somebody who has done a little bit of too much of everything, and now they're just babbling stuff, like they're just incoherently or they're full of fears or whatever, paranoia, psychosis, anything, all kinds of things like that, which basically on the spiritual plane, they are to do with certain entities that have been evoked, that have been mishandled. And for all of those, to prevent that, you have the safeguards and the systems and the structure, right? And this is true. You need that. You can't let go of that like New Age people do. New Ageism is dangerous. New Ageism is dangerous. I warn you, caution you with love, in a friendly way, but stern and strict too. New Age path is dangerous for you, right? The New Age path where you're just like, I'm do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I'm we are all so spiritual. We're gonna just, try something new every day and so on. And it's dangerous, right? A little bit of psychoactive substances here, a little bit of evocation there, a little bit of shadow work where everybody's going to talk about their issues now without knowing what we're doing. All of that stuff is dangerous. It's dangerous. It's going to, without care, without understanding, without guidance, without setting, without proper instruction, system, and structure, it's going to lead you into dangerous territories. I know this from experience. I've seen this many times. I've been there myself, and I'm telling you this with the utmost clarity. You need system. You need structure, right? So now that we know this, you have two pathways. There's two options for you. There's two things you can do. The first one the first thing you can do is, and this is going to be for the majority of people, the thing to do. For most people, it's going to be the thing to do, right? The first thing is that you follow a given tradition. You go and learn that tradition first before you start mixing and matching, before you start integrating other stuff, before you start going and, catching here and there some other practices. And, you learn one tradition first. That tradition, if that's, esoteric Christianity, or if that's Sufism, right? If that's Kashmir Shaivism, it doesn't matter. It's one tradition that you have to stay within that tradition first and learn that tradition first. And actually, mixed martial artists, the great ones, that's what they do, right? They become masters in one tradition first, and then they go and mix and match. Although nowadays, it's not 100% fitting analogy. Spiritual domain has much more safeguards too, much more safeguards, much more dangerous. Worst thing that can happen to you in a martial arts fight is you break your bones, right? Absolutely worst thing is you get knocked out. Maybe you die even in the ring, right? Maybe the worst thing can happen. They catch a really strange kind of hit. They die in the ring, right? Even that is nowhere near as bad as what can happen to you in the spiritual domain if you're going somewhere without the safeguards, right? If you're going into the darkest territories, you can damage your soul for lifetimes. Worse than actually dying here in a ring, right? So you need to be careful. But that's the one path that stands open to most people. To learn one tradition first. To learn one tradition first, master that tradition, learn the safeguards, learn the system, learn the structure, and then move from there. There's a second path though. The second path is, that I'm going to present to you, is to follow a system that allows you to have structure, to have guidance, to have safeguards, but from a integrative perspective. And this system I'm presenting to you here, it's called NineSystems. NineSystems, it's based on the Nineplex. The Nineplex is an integrative understanding, an integrative model of conscious reality, which I have received and refined over the last 12 years, starting with the big consciousness shift of 2012, and exactly one Jupiter cycle after, 12 years after, it's come to fruition, to the place where it's being acted and on and enacted and brought into public discourse and public domain. And in the Nineplex, we have an understanding of the different levels of conscious reality, right? Starting from the plane of physical reality, where we have instinctive, affective, cognitive, going over the soul or vital level, etheric, astral, noetic, and into the spirit level, the supreme and supernal, akashic, archetypal, and avataric. And for each one of those, for each one of those levels, we have certain safeguards, structures, systems, exercises, and a clear understanding of their interrelations as well, because we have a hierarchical and the dynamic interrelation. Now, I'm not going to go too much into this right now. You can find out much more about this in future. Make sure to subscribe here and to hit the notification bell. Go on ultrasapient.xyz and make sure to be in the know. But I'm going to tell you this much so you understand and have an image and have a picture. For instance, if somebody is doing qigong, pranayama, energy work, right? Vital body energy work. The subtle energy, which is the auric energy around you that you can activate through these practices, yoga, pranayama, qigong. And the chi that is activated in this practice, it can serve as a foundation and a base for things like heart-centric prayer. Heart-centric prayer is on the astral level. Right? The etheric level grounds the astral level. It grounds the astral level. Therefore, the work on your chi, it is helping you to ground the heart-centric prayer. And it's helping you to ground things like guided visualization. Guided visualization is on the astral level as well. But then there is a cross connection. So you can see this here. There's a cross connection between the astral and the affective. You see here? The affective level, and the affective level has on it things like daily ritual prayer, right? Daily ritual prayer energizes heart-centric prayer and guided visualization, which is in the astral, right? But chi work and energy work and breath work, which is on the etheric, grounds heart-centric prayer, which is on the astral and the guided visualization, right? So now you're starting to understand there's cross connections, and each one of those has structure, safeguards, rules, allows you to work in it, right? We're creating a work group, a global, planetary-wide, planet-wide work group, right? That you can be a part of, an ultra-conscious collective that you can be a part of, where we're gonna work through and add the individual experiences from the different perspectives as well to NineSystems, to the system, right? And it's going to be a co-creative canvas where we add our different experiences to the structure that has been received and refined by myself. And you can be part of that. Again, go on ultrasapient.xyz and you can be a part of that. But now for the takeaway for this video, mixed spiritual arts. You can create mixed spiritual arts, but you need to be careful. You need to be careful. You need system. You need structure. You need safeguards, right? For most people, you're going to find those in an existing tradition. You're going to find those in an existing tradition, right? Or you can be part of the emergence of a new tradition. I wish you all the best. Until the next time, be blessed.